Hi everyone. Today I want to talk to you about perspective and how we use this as a tool when we're creating drawings. Now, first of all, perspective is divided up into two different types of perspective. One of them is called atmospheric perspective. We are not actually going to use atmospheric perspective in the upcoming project, but I just wanted you to be aware of it and know that we're going to come back to this later on this semester in another drawing. But basically what this means is it's the effect that you get when faraway objects take on the colors of the atmospheric haze. So Leonardo da Vinci was the first one to use this term, aerial perspective, which is just another word for atmospheric perspective, in his treatise on painting. And he wrote, colors become weaker in proportion to their distance from the person who's looking at them. So basically, things that are closer to you in the foreground have richer, more saturated colors. And as it goes further away off into the distance, they become less rich, less saturated. They become a little bit dull with a slightly bluish gray tint to them. So if you look at a photograph of, like, say, these mountains, these beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, you can get a sense of how to create the illusion of atmospheric perspective in your drawing. Basically, the objects that are further away will have lighter values. If you notice, the distant mountains are lighter in value. They're going to have softer lines and less detail. They have a lot less contrast, and they also have a lot less saturation in colors, with a possible shift to blue or a blue-gray. So if you'll notice in this photograph, the plants that are up close, you'll see every single leaf, all the little details of how the light's falling on them. And as they go further away, you start to see something that's more like a pattern instead, and just some speckles. And then as it goes further and further away, you lose a lot of that detail and it just becomes these hazy lines. The perspective, the type of perspective that we're really going to work on in this section is called linear perspective, as opposed to atmospheric perspective. So what we're going to look at for this project is linear perspective, which is a type of study that's attributed to Leon Battista Alberti and the sculptor Filippo Brunelleschi in the 15th century. So this is back when mathematicians and artists and scientists were working together. And what they were trying to do was demonstrate that space could be articulated mathematically to express depth. So what we have here is an example of what's called a perspective machine, as depicted by Albrecht Dürer in 1530. So if you'll notice that he's created this string contraption where he's touching different parts of this lute. And this would have been closed while this man over here was touching the same parts, making dots on a piece of paper. And when he opens this piece of paper, you see an image appear of that lute. But if you'll notice, it's in what's called foreshortening. You have it going off into the distance, and the foreground is this part that's closest to you. So what linear perspective essentially is, it's a system of rules that uses lines to provide the artist with information about how an object should appear in space. Now, I want to point out that these rules are created by people who are trying to figure out a way of recreating what they see in nature. So these lines don't actually exist in nature, but we have to create them as a template for our drawings. And it's essentially how we would create the illusion of deep space when we're putting drawings on a flat sheet, two-dimensional piece of paper, but we want to create that illusion that there's depth in it. So this really has a lot to do with basically how our eyes sit on our face. We have two eyes in the front of our face, as opposed to, say, like fish that have eyes on the sides of their faces. They would see the world in a whole different way, but we have two eyes in the front, and this is how we see the world, and this is how you can translate it onto a piece of paper to make it look realistic and give the illusion of depth. So there are a few laws of convergence that really apply here. And it really helps you, if you can remember these three laws, really will help you create that illusion of depth. So one of them is that objects appear to become smaller as they move further away. What we have here is a series of trees that are really just becoming smaller and smaller and smaller as it moves across to the side of the page. But because of the way they're placed, it actually looks like you're looking into deep space and not just a row of trees that get gradually smaller. Another law of convergence is that parallel lines moving away from the viewer will appear to converge. So if you notice these railway lines, they're further away here, the ones that are closest to you. And as you go into the distance, they become closer and closer. So they are converging by becoming closer and closer, but they're still parallel lines. They never cross each other. Same with these light poles, these telegraph poles. As they get further and further away, they get closer and closer and closer, but they're still parallel lines. Another law of convergence, this is number 3, the third one, as objects move back in space, the objects themselves and the space between them will appear to get smaller and compress. So we've already talked about how the objects become smaller and the parallel lines will compress, but in this case, the spaces in between also compress. And I can see it here in the spaces between the windows, they get smaller. Sometimes the spaces that are like these alleys between the buildings, they will also compress and become smaller. So there are a few rules that you want to follow when you're drawing in linear perspective. First thing you want to do is establish the horizon line. And this is this line that's across the center of this page. And it really has a lot to do with your perspective, where your line of sight is, where your eyes are in relationship to what you're looking at and what you're drawing. And then you're going to establish the vanishing points. In this case, there are 2 vanishing points on this drawing. So this is a 2-point perspective drawing. And it really changes, especially the horizon line, depending on whether you're looking at something street level, that's something straight directly in front of you, or if you're looking from above, which would make you looking down at bird's eye view, or if you're down below and you're looking up at it, looking at it from a worm's eye view. So imagine if this is a building and you're looking at it from the sidewalk, you're flying over it like a bird, or you're laying down on the sidewalk looking up at it as if you were a worm. So with these rules, if you can follow all of them for 3 different types of perspective, we're going to start by talking about 1-point perspective. So in 1-point perspective, we have one horizon line. Of course, this is the first thing we always establish. And then in this case, there's only one vanishing point. And what we have are what are called orthogonal lines that converge at the vanishing point. That's just the lines that you sort of follow to create that illusion of depth. Those are the orthogonal lines. 1 point means there's one vanishing point. So here are some examples of how you can use 1-point perspective in a drawing. This is a drawing of a subway, and you'll notice that all of these orthogonal lines, again, they're not lines that really exist in nature, but you're using them as a tool to create this illusion. All of the lines are kind of pointing at a vanishing point, I'm guessing is about right there. And notice that you're not seeing a literal horizon line. We can't see that distant horizon line because you're not always going to be standing at a point where you can see like a literal horizon line, but it is an implied horizon line in the distance with a vanishing point right here with these orthogonal lines that come all away from that same single point. So here again is Brunelleschi's drawing. So he really needed to be able to organize these thoughts mathematically because he worked a lot with architecture. And this really does play a big role in architectural drawings. It really helps you see the depth of a space like this one in this basilica, where all of these orthogonal lines again point to one vanishing point. I think I'm guessing it's right about here. So this is what I'm seeing is the horizon line, and then all of these lines coming to this one single vanishing point. This is a really nice drawing of the Taj Mahal. It's very dramatic because it's in this 1-point perspective. And we've got so many different elements pointing at, basically, I would say just above the doorway is the vanishing point. Now, this is one of those times when your mind might play some tricks on you because you want to call this a horizon line. And yeah, literally, this is a horizon line. But unless you're laying down on the grass and looking at that horizon line, you're going to see it up where your eyes are. So the artist's eyes were up at this height and seeing that point as the horizon line. The vanishing point is right about here, and all of these orthogonal lines lead away from that vanishing point. So I wanted to include this because we still have those same elements of having the horizon line. This one's a very distinct horizon line right here across the top third of the page. But I love this because there is a vanishing point. It's not on the page, though. You don't necessarily have to have a vanishing point on the page to create an image that's in perspective. This one, I'm guessing, is by following the lines, is probably right about there is where the vanishing point would fall on the horizon line. Now, the exercise we're going to be doing in class is similar to this one, where we're going to be looking down the length of a hallway, and we're going to use architectural elements to help us find that vanishing point and focusing the vanishing point and the horizon on the back wall that you're looking at. But if you were to take it out into an exterior space, you could do the same thing. Use those architectural elements, like where the walls meet the ground, to create those orthogonal lines. And I'm going to say this, if we follow this line, the vanishing point is right about here above this guy's collar. And notice how the doorway, the top and bottom of this doorway, both point at that one singular vanishing point. So the top of the doorway is a little bit less dramatic and the bottom of the doorway is a lot more dramatic. And that, again, is what creates that illusion of the deep space. Now, back to the three types of perspective. What we've just talked about is one-point perspective. Now we have a different type, which is two-point perspective. And that basically means on the horizon line, you have two vanishing points. And that creates this illusion of two-point perspective, where you're looking at an object usually along the edge, like a corner. If you can see here, you're looking at a corner, and there are two sides that fall away to two separate vanishing points in the distance. So going back to this drawing that we looked at earlier, we're looking at the corner of this building, and on this side, they follow orthogonal lines to one vanishing point on this corner of the page, and on this side of this corner, they follow orthogonal lines to a second vanishing point. So again, this is a two-point perspective drawing. If you're inside a building, you could use the corner of an interior hallway as a reference to create interior two-point perspective. So we've got one point that's down at the end of this hallway, and that door in the center, about in the center of that door. And again, this second vanishing point is not even on the page, it's off the page, right around here somewhere. And, this is something that's really useful for highly technical and architectural drawings. In this case, the corner of the building is really not seen. You can see it on the corner of this beam, and the rest of it is just implied. But you can see how one point comes over here following these lines, and the other point is down here following those lines. Now, this perspective can be really extreme in some of these drawings, and maybe you don't want to have it to encompass the entire drawing that you're working on. It could be just for an element. So if you'll notice, these people in the foreground are really just facing us. They're just in the foreground, and it's pretty much a flat depth. But this artist has decided to emphasize the drama of this building and the way it goes back into the distance by creating this in extreme two-point perspective. So again, two vanishing points here and one over here. Not everything in the painting is following those lines to utilize those two vanishing points. All right, here we go. We're on the third type of perspective. We talked about one-point perspective with one vanishing point. Two-point perspective that has two vanishing points. Now we're at three-point perspective. And of course, it has three vanishing points. So along with the two vanishing points on the horizon line, with three-point perspective, you have one more, and it can be either above or below. In this drawing, it's below the horizon line. So you're kind of looking down at this chair. So this is bird's eye perspective. You're kind of above the chair looking down at it. Here's your third point. Your third point could be above the horizon line. Let's take a look at this next slide. Here we have the two examples of worm's eye and bird's eye view using three-point perspective. We've got the 2 points on either side, one on the upper top of the paper, and you're looking up at these series of blocks. In this case, you've got the two on the horizon line and then one down at the bottom of the paper. Now you're looking down at these blocks. We're going to return to this later on in the semester with another perspective drawing that really deals a lot with three-point perspective and monumental qualities of using three-point perspective. And when you use three-point perspective, it tends to create a lot of drama, and it really only works if you're really showing something that has this monumental quality. This is quite literally what you're looking at when you are above tall skyscrapers, and the vanishing point is right here in this intersection, and this person has put in a bird to show you that you're looking at it from bird's eye perspective, looking down. And in this case, the vanishing point is right here on the paper. But if you're looking at a similar cityscape and move the vanishing point off the paper, I mean, this is actually pretty far down off the paper. it really reduces that extreme angle. So look again, this is very, very extreme. And this is a little bit less extreme. You're looking at things from a little bit of a distance. So this is a tool to draw things architecturally correctly, or in some cases, you might want to use it as an element to create expressiveness in your drawing. You know, in some cases, you might be drawing a building that is big, but maybe you want to give it something more of a foreboding and heavy and weighty kind of feel. You add this 3-point perspective and it becomes something different, almost tells more of a story in a way. And this one as well, most of this drawing is drawn with so much detail that it looks almost like precise and exact and architectural, but you can tell, you know, there's no way we could be looking at the bottom of this building. So the artist has taken it into, you know, their consideration of how they wanted this building depicted, just large and looming and kind of bigger than life. This is one of my favorite slides because I feel like this is a really great way to think about how to approach these 3 types of perspective. I like to say, let's start off with this side. You're going into a room and across the room you see a bookshelf. And what you're looking at is the side of the bookshelf and you can see the face of the bookshelf and you decide you need to go to that bookshelf and get a book. You're looking at this bookshelf in 2-point perspective because of this corner here, and this side is going to that vanishing point and the rest of it is going to that vanishing point. And here we have 2-point perspective from a distance. You get up close to the bookshelf and you maybe lean over a little bit. You're looking at the straight face of it right here. You can see just the front of it. Notice you can't really see the sides. You can see a little bit of the top, but you're looking at the face of the bookshelf now. You're trying to pick out a book. Which one are you going to get? Here we have 1-point perspective. This is all going towards 1 point on the horizon line. I'm sorry, 1 vanishing point on the horizon line. Now let's say you found the book you want. You pull it off the shelf and you stand up. And at this point, you're kind of looming over the bookshelf. So you're standing really close to the bookshelf. You can see the top of it. And here we bring in that 3rd-point perspective. This is where that perspective is a little bit more extreme than it was when you were across the room and looking at it in 2-point perspective, because you're so close to it and you're looking at it from bird's eye view. You're looking from above down onto the bookshelf. So in this way, what I'm saying is that these rules of perspective and these laws of perspective are really about how you are looking at the thing that you are drawing. Depending on where you're standing and how you see it, that's how you would, that's the tool that you would use to draw it with. It might be best at 1 point, might be best at 2 point, it might be best at 3 point. And that's what you'll have to choose to create the drawing and the effect of illusion that you want. For our drawing exercise, we are going to work on drawing an interior space. It's going to be a hallway, and it should have plenty of architectural elements that help you see the 1-point perspective. So we're going to look at a point down at the end of the hallway. We're going to follow the lines along the ceiling, along the floor. We're going to use elements of windows and lights to create those illusions of the orthogonal lines coming to a vanishing point. And you might have a room that has bookshelves or a rug or any other elements, maybe tiles on the ceiling that helps you create that illusion of deep space. This is a hallway. I believe there's some exterior windows here. You're seeing a little bit of the outside, and then you're looking down this length of this outdoor hallway. Notice that for this perspective, the person was standing really close to this side, these rails over here. So that's why we're seeing most of this wall, but hardly any of this wall. So normally I would take our class into the Holden building. This is one of the hallways in Holden on the main floor, and we would split up into small groups. I'm going to leave this as your choice. You can either go into Holden and look down the hallway and use that for your hallway drawing, or you might want to choose a different hallway that's more familiar to you. Maybe it's in your dorm or in your house or in another building that you frequent. But take a look at what you can see to sort of plant your view down at the end of the hallway, a doorway or a wall. This one, I think, throws students off a little bit because that ceiling literally is a slant. So that throws a little bit extra challenge in there for students who are up for it. But it's nice to see these windows used as elements of the orthogonal line to help create that illusion of deep space. And then these baseboards really help as well. This is the other hallway in Holden, and this person has chosen to depict a little bit more that they see in there. For instance, there's a rug that's rolled up in the hallway, and they've created that illusion of that rug sort of sitting along the edge of the wall. There are some little pineapple shapes in the window. There's a distinct exit sign, and you can see out the window back there some leaves and grass. So you can add as much or as little of those kinds of extra elements in there that you want to help create this the drawing, the expressiveness in your drawing. But notice that this person has created these really nice dark lines to show emphasis on the perspective of this hallway. Some of these lighter lines are just sort of extras. I love putting these two next to each other because you can see how it's actually the same hallway, but the students were essentially sitting next to each other in the hallway. So from one perspective, you're seeing it looking like this. From another perspective, against this left-hand wall, you're seeing it from this perspective. So you can see they're basically the same hallway, but from different sides. So it really has a lot to do with where you're sitting in the hallway. Are you right in the middle? Are you sitting against one wall or another? And you're going to create that perspective based on where you sit. It also depends on if you're sitting on the floor or on the chair, if you have an easel and you're standing to create this drawing. And I love this drawing because from the other end of the hallway, one of the students decided to draw a lot of the other drawing students that were sitting there watching from that end of the hallway. So we were really split up into small groups in different parts and working on these drawings as a group together. Now, before you get started on your hallway drawing, first of all, I would like for you to do a little bit of practice exercises. We're going to do that together in class. And then for your homework assignment, you're going to create your name in block letters using 1-point perspective. So here are a few examples of how to create that. Oh, I wanted to show you that this one, Ruby, again, you're looking at it in a specific perspective with a horizon line across the top, vanishing point up here, and you're looking down at the name. So we've got bird's eye view for Ruby's name. And then we've got Kylie here where we have horizon line across the middle, vanishing point smack in the middle, and we're looking at it street level view. And then here we have Lacey who has erased, I think, her vanishing point and horizon line, but you can tell because you're looking at the bottom of these block letters that now we're at worm's eye view looking up at these blocks. And then for those of you who have had experience doing perspective and drawing in perspective before, I'm going to ask you to do your name in 2-point perspective. That gives you a little bit of an extra challenge. Now, if drawing in perspective is something brand new to you, stick with a 1-point perspective. But if you're up for an extra challenge, go ahead and try creating 2 vanishing points on your page and drawing your block letter names in 2-point perspective instead. So next time we meet, we'll do some exercises and we'll talk more about perspective, and then we'll get into some of these drawing exercises together.